He's late today. Gordon Carruthers leans back in his wheelchair and gazes out the window. The grounds need raking again. St. Dominic's brochure made so much of their stately oak trees, but what a mess they made. He sighs, and a small cloud appears in the glass. At least I'm still breathing, he thinks. Oh, how he misses New York. The comforting closeness of brick, glass, and concrete. Buildings that house the busy, the hurried, the purposeful. All this open space is disconcerting. With his one good hand, he readjusts his limp arm so that it lies more naturally. There. Now it looks as if it's resting casually after swilling a glass of claret up against the light. A few feet away, his roommate, Ray, is in his bed, pretending to read one of those dreadful spy thrillers he gets from the bookmobile on Thursday. But Carruthers knows that Ray, too, is waiting for the sound of Brutus's claws to announce her arrival. "She's late," says Ray, demonstrating his relentless gift for stating the obvious. Back when he was still Professor Carruthers, he eviscerated more than one upstart freshman for statements far more insightful than any of Ray's. Instead, he could only shrug his response, turning away to discourage any further talk. Down in the passenger loading zone, you can see Mr. O'Malley's daughter has settled his father into her Buick. Such a plain, graceless girl, but dutiful. Well, certainly dutiful. She arrives every Sunday without fail to take her father to church and then home to dinner. It's the least she can do, thinks Carruthers, after walling him up here like Poe's most unfortunate Fortunato. Carruthers' son Robert and daughter-in-law Angela come only once a month. They sneak glances at the clock while bantering on about the houses they were forever redecorating. I mean, each visit, Angela seems to have added yet another piece of jewelry to her already crowded neck. Although why she would want to call attention to one of her least attractive features, Carruthers cannot guess. He's never found her type attractive. Too bovine for his taste. He thinks wistfully of the light, sophisticated women Robert brought home from college. Women Carruthers have been able to talk to about poetry and wine. Women who would flirted shyly with him, would even have potential conquests, would have been his potential conquests. Or had there been some conquests? Carruthers has a vague recollections of furtive grapplings in a pantry one Thanksgiving and perhaps a terrible scene afterwards. Yes, that seems right. Robert stopped visiting his father for many years after that. Perhaps Angela's appeal for Robert was that his father found her repellent. Angela and Robert take Carruthers to their home occasionally, an interminably burdened 2-hour drive. God, he hates New Jersey. The outings are torturous exercises in forced normalcy. Angela asking a little too brightly, "How's that, Dad?" Or, "You doing okay, Dad?" Oh, he hates the way she says Dad, with an unnatural emphasis as if she's showing off some beefy piece of vocabulary she'd only recently acquired. Robert just looks on meekly. When did his son become such a mouse? Vanished are all those adolescent rages that erupted after his parents' marriage went to hell. All spent now. Still, any break in the tedium is glorious. The hands on his watch tick past 3 o'clock. Where is she? His shoes pinch his swollen feet horribly. Nurse, whatever her name is, hadn't wanted to help him into them, so he had to insist quite forcibly, humiliatingly, with grunts and gestures. Slippers with a suit? Ugh, ridiculous. Maybe she's not coming today, says Ray, giving up all pretense of reading. Carruthers narrows his eyes at his roommate, but says nothing. Now, if Ray thinks he will give up and ring to be wheeled to the rec room, he's a fool. See, a fierce rivalry between the men emerged the day of that first visit several weeks ago. He was in his wheelchair, sunken down in one of those stuporous naps induced by a fistful of pills, when he awoke with a start to a dog's hot breath tickling the hairs on his arm. The room would not stop spinning, and for a terrible instant, Carruthers thought his mind might finally have crumbled. But then, she spoke. "Mr. Carruthers, would you like to meet Brutus?" Her voice was gentle. He blinked up at her slowly. She stood, framed by the window, the afternoon sun creating a halo around her. "Angel," he muttered, though it came out as a grotesque, strangled noise. When well rested and with enormous force of will, he could form a handful of coherent words, but the outcome of his efforts is at best unpredictable. But she smiled at him, as if she understood. "Sit, Brutus," she said, and the dog obeyed instantly. Carruthers had never really liked dogs and their chaos and filth. Because it belonged to her, though, this beast, tall and lean with eerie white blue eyes, was not nearly so repellent. He tried to bring his hand up to pat its head, but had forgotten he couldn't lift it more than a few inches. Suddenly, she was kneeling next to him, placing her smooth hand over his useless one, brushing it over the thick gray fur of the dog's ruff. The sweet smell of her and the sensation of her fingers cradling his wrist intoxicated him. He concentrated very hard on a single word, as his speech therapist had encouraged him to do, and managed to whisper, "Soft." Then she laughed. Husky, honeyed laugh. Their eyes met, and he recognized in her at once a fellow sensualist. "Yes, he is soft," she said. How gratifying to finally have someone not speak to him as if he were a slow, obstinate child. She spoke in low, private tones, the kind adults who understand one another use, and he soaked up the nearness of her like Tantalus at last touching his lips to cool water. "Brutus and I come once a week," she was saying, but Carruthers was having difficulty concentrating, distracted by the ripeness of her lower lip. Her eyes, were they brown? Or was there a burst of green at their center? And the arc of her brow that rose and fell as she talked. "I used to visit my grandmother who loved dogs and got permission to bring Brutus." And here she rubbed the mongrel's jowls, causing it to stare up at her in naked adoration. "After she died last year, we joined the Therapet program." How could she stand it? Didn't her nostrils clench shut at the stench of urine and decay? Didn't the slobbering souls who had once been human make her skin shudder? Didn't the dearth of anything resembling intelligent conversation make her want to run screaming? As if on cue, Ray spoke out. Ray, who had not uttered a single syllable of import in the 9 months Carruthers had spent shackled. "Hey, I like dogs too. Here, boy," he calls out, patting the side of his bed. She and Brutus move to Ray's bedside, and Brutus wags his tail at Ray, as Ray rubbed at him roughly. "Ah, yes, you're a good boy, aren't you?" And the beast licks Ray's face. Revolting. But Ray only said, "At my age, I guess that's all the smooch I'm gonna get." And she laughed, long and sweet. Ray grinned at Carruthers over the dog's head, clearly gloating. And thus, their rivalry was born. Now, every visit the men competed to be the first to make her laugh. Now, last week, Ray had resorted to a ridiculous joke he picked up from an orderly and embellished shamelessly. Something about an old monk weeping when he realized the proper biblical translation was actually celebrate, not celibate. Oh, that's a good one, she'd said, and Ray wore an insufferably exultant smile the rest of the day. Cheater. Well, if that was how he wanted to play, Carruthers was an opponent to be reckoned with. He was ready for Ray this week. Carruthers tried to ease the ache of waiting by conjuring up her in her mind. He imagined not her smooth brown hair, nor even her lovely laugh. Instead, he remembers her smell that lingers after she's gone. She smells of summer, of just ripened peaches promising juice, sweet and sticky. He has almost imagined that peach taste when the clatter of Brutus's claws stir him from his reverie. Both men sit up straighter. Ray puts his book on the bedside table and smooths the hideous orange afghan his daughter in Texas crocheted for him. Carruthers readjusts his lifeless arm and tries to arrange his face into a smile, hoping it's not the usual lopsided grimace. He pats his pocket to make sure the bit of roast beef he squirreled away from dinner last night is still there. It's an important component of his plan that Brutus come to him first. He concentrates on the words he will speak when Brutus had gulped down the last of the roast beef. See, all morning, Carruthers practiced quietly under his breath. How had he not thought of it before? Et tu was all he thought he needed to get out. Though, if necessary, he was prepared to add brute. See, she'd understand and she'd laugh, perhaps touching Carruthers' hand. They'd laugh together. Brutus rounds the corner, his tails jingling happily, and then, at last, she's there, in their room. Not imagination or dream, but flesh. Hello, boys. Carruthers loves that she calls him that. It sounds so flirty and young. Brutus wavers between the two men before ignoring Ray's frantic gesturing and choosing Carruthers instead. Ray feigns indifference and Carruthers shoots him a brief look of triumph before slipping the hidden morsel to Brutus. She stands in front of him. He thinks not for the first time of Byron. Carruthers had loved reading poetry to his classes, helping his students hear the music buried in the words. If he still had command of language, he would ask her casually if she'd ever read She Walks in Beauty Like the Night. No, she'd say, I don't know that one. And he would recite it to her and touch her with Byron's words. Instead, he must settle for cheap parlor tricks to lure her dog to his side. What a spiteful twist of fate that Carruthers should discover such an exquisite creature when he is immured in his tomb of a body. Brutus had finished the roast beef and is snuffling at Carruthers' pocket, pushing a cold, wet nose into his hand, searching for more. Just then, she bends over to scratch Brutus' head, and Carruthers spies the ring. He's certain it wasn't there before. His practiced eyes would never have missed a detail like that. It is a single diamond in a solitaire setting, encircling the fourth finger on her left hand. She's speaking, but he can't think because of the ring with its cruel sparkle that means some mindless cretin who has no idea of her value is free to touch her, to brush his lips across the nape of her neck where her smell is most concentrated. It is unbearable. There is so much he wanted to say to her, but cannot. He for whom words were a way of life, he who lectured so eloquently to thousands is now left without even the ability to tell a nurse when he needed to have a bowel movement. There is so much he wanted to say. He wanted to tell her that he regrets not having been a better father, that he's sorry he seduced and callously tossed aside all those beautiful, intelligent women. How in the dark, a loneliness comes over him like a sickness. How he is afraid to die but cannot bear to live another day. He wants to tell her that Byron loved dogs too. How he wrote a beautiful epitaph for his Newfoundland, whose gravestone is bigger than his own. He wants to tell her that she too walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry nights. He longs to feel a flood of words crowd together in his mouth. A single, lonely word slips out. Beauty, he says. His voice is cracked and hollow and unimaginably old. She stops petting the dog, looks up at him in surprise and laughs. "Aren't you the smooth operator, Mr. Carruthers?" she says, then winks indulgently. And something, some fleeting, unnamed something, moves just out of reach. "Here, boy," calls Ray. "Here, boy." And Beauty and Brutus move to Ray's bed, on to their next patient. Et tu, thinks Carruthers, as he watches her. Et tu.